I knew something was off the second I saw my own property sign drifting down the creek like it had given up on me, just bobbing along like it didn't belong anywhere anymore. And I remember standing there on the bank thinking, all right, either the wind got real ambitious overnight, or someone decided my land wasn't mine anymore. Turns out, it was the second one. My name's Cole Bennett, and about a year ago, I bought this quiet piece of land just outside a small North Carolina town. The kind of place where mornings are slow, neighbors wave whether they know you or not, and the loudest thing you usually hear is a screen door slamming somewhere down the road. What sold me wasn't the house, though. It was the creek. It cut right along the back edge of the property, curved through a patch of trees like it had been there forever, and according to the deed, every inch of it was mine. Not shared, not easement, not community access mine. Now right next to my land sat this HOA neighborhood, Cedar Ridge Estates. Clean lawns, identical mailboxes, rules about everything from fence height to the color of your curtains, and at the center of it all was a woman named Linda Carver. She was the HOA president, mid-50s, always dressed like she had somewhere important to be even when she didn't, clipboard tucked under her arm like it was part of her body, and a way of talking to people that felt less like a conversation and more like a warning. The first time she came by, it was about my mailbox. Said it didn't match community standards. I told her I wasn't part of the community. She smiled like I'd made a joke, the kind of smile that says she heard you, but she's already decided you're wrong. A week later, it was my shed windows, too reflective, apparently. Then it was my grass, then my driveway, then a note taped to my door about visual harmony. Every time I reminded her, calmly at first, that my property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. Every time she nodded, wrote something down, and came back with another complaint. So yeah, when I saw that sign floating in the creek, I had a pretty good guess who'd been busy. I walked down toward the water, boots crunching over gravel I knew hadn't been there before, and that's when I saw them. 3 people sitting in folding chairs right on my bank, lines cast into my creek like they were on a weekend retreat. Linda was there, of course, sunglasses on, iced drink in hand, and next to her were 2 others I recognized from driving past the neighborhood, her regular crew. They had a cooler, a speaker playing soft jazz. I mean, they weren't even trying to hide it. It was like they'd claimed the place. I cleared my throat loud enough to cut through the music, and Linda turned her head slow, like she'd been expecting me all along. "Well, hey there, Cole," she said, all sweet and fake. "We figured we'd finally enjoy this little creek of yours. Seemed a shame to let it go to waste." I just stood there for a second, letting that settle. Then I said, "You're on private property." One of the others laughed, actually laughed, like I'd said something ridiculous. "It's just water," she said. "Relax." That's when I pulled out the laminated copy of my deed I kept in a waterproof sleeve under the porch. "Yeah, I'm that guy," and I held it up. "From that bridge," I said, pointing upstream, "to that oak tree down there, every bit of this is mine." Linda didn't even look at it. She just waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "The board voted last month to open it up for community use," she said, casual as anything. I stared at her. "You can't vote to give away something you don't own." She tilted her head, smiled again. "We're not harming anything, Cole, and honestly, we've been coming down here for weeks." That part stuck. Weeks. I didn't argue after that. Didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I just nodded, turned around, and walked back up toward the house. Because the second she said that, I knew something she didn't. I had cameras. I installed them myself when I moved in, 4 of them covering the back lot, including one pointed right at the creek bend. I hadn't checked the footage in a while, not since early spring when a raccoon decided my tackle box looked like a buffet, but now, now I had a reason. I went inside, pulled up the feed, and sat down at the kitchen table, and I don't think I moved for the next hour. They hadn't just been fishing. About 3 weeks back, right around 9 in the morning, there was Linda and 2 guys from the HOA I recognized standing right near the water with a chainsaw. I watched them cut down one of my dogwood trees. Not trim it, not clean it up, cut it clean through, let it fall, then drag the trunk a few feet and set it up like a bench. A couple days later, they came back with bags of gravel, dumping it along the path like they were building a walkway. Then another clip, rope swing going up on a low branch. And then the one that really got me, kids. 6, maybe 7 of them, splashing in the creek while the adults sat back, drinking like it was a backyard party. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and for a second I just felt this quiet kind of anger. Not loud, not explosive, just steady. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was someone deciding the rules didn't apply to them and expecting me to just go along with it. I printed everything, timestamps, still frames, all of it, locked the originals away, and then I made 2 calls. First to a friend of mine, Rachel Stein, real estate attorney, sharp as they come, and second to the county sheriff's office. By the time Deputy Harris was standing in my backyard that afternoon, watching the footage on my tablet, even he shook his head. "Yeah," he said after a long pause, "this isn't just trespassing." And that's when I knew this wasn't going to be a small fight. This was about to turn into something a whole lot bigger than a creek. Deputy Harris stood there a while longer, arms folded, watching the footage loop again. The chainsaw, the gravel, the kids in the water, and then he let out this low breath like he'd already made up his mind before he even turned back to me. "They altered your land, cut a tree, built structures, and brought minors onto private property without permission," he said, tapping the screen lightly. "That's not a misunderstanding, Cole. That's a stack of violations." I asked him straight, "Can you cite them?" And he gave me a look, half tired, half amused, like I didn't realize how deep this was already. "We're past citations," he said. "The real question is, you want to press charges?" And I didn't hesitate, not even for a second. "Yeah," I said, "I do." By that evening, Rachel had already reviewed everything I sent her. The deed, the footage, even the HOA bylaws I'd managed to dig up online. And when she called me, there was this edge in her voice I hadn't heard before, like she'd found something interesting. "Cole," she said, "you're going to like this. Your property isn't even inside their HOA boundary." I sat up a little straighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, "you're adjacent. But legally, you're not a member, not subject to their rules, not obligated to anything they're enforcing. Every notice they've sent you, every warning, every fine, none of it has any authority." I let that sink in, and then I actually laughed, first time all day. "So they've been policing land they don't control?" "Not just that," she said. "If they've been collecting or attempting to collect money from you, that starts leaning into fraud." That word hung there a second, fraud. Suddenly, this wasn't just some overbearing HOA president with a power complex. This was something else. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint: trespassing, property damage, unlawful land alteration, the whole list. Rachel started drafting a civil suit at the same time, talking injunctions, damages, legal fees, and honestly, it all moved faster than I expected. Like once the first domino tipped, everything else just started lining up behind it. 2 days later, the sheriff's office served them. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it fast. Small towns don't keep secrets long. I was unloading groceries when my neighbor, Frank, older guy, retired mechanic, always smells faintly like motor oil, came walking over with that grin like he'd just seen something he'd been waiting for. "You really did it, huh?" he said. "Got him served?" I nodded. "Sure did." He let out a whistle. Linda was out there yelling at the deputy like he was a waiter who brought the wrong drink. Didn't go how she thought it would. And that's when something shifted. People started talking. At first it was just quiet, a couple neighbors stopping by, asking what happened, wanting to see the footage. Then it turned into something bigger. A young couple from down the road brought over a pie, said they'd been fined twice for things that weren't even in the HOA handbook. A nurse named Danielle told me they'd threatened her over parking in her own driveway, something about angle compliance. Another guy said they'd forced him to redo his fence 3 times, each time changing the rule just enough to keep him paying. It wasn't just me. So I started organizing it: folders, files, names, dates, everything. Not just my case anymore, all of it. I labeled it simple: HOA overreach. And the more I added, the worse it looked. By the weekend, the HOA called an emergency meeting at their community center, probably thinking they could get ahead of it, control the narrative. But here's the thing. I didn't go. I didn't need to. Rachel went for me. She walked in there with a stack of folders under her arm, handed one to every board member: footage, legal documents, boundary maps, a formal notice stating I wasn't under their jurisdiction, and a warning that any further action toward me would be considered harassment under state law. She told me later the room went real quiet after that, like the kind of quiet where people suddenly realize they're not in control anymore. Linda, apparently, didn't take it well. Rachel said she went pale, like the color just drained right out of her. But she still tried to hold it together, still tried to argue that the HOA had community authority, until Rachel pointed to the county records and said, "Real calm. Authority requires jurisdiction, and you don't have it." That was the beginning of the unraveling. By Monday, one of the board members had already resigned. Another tried to distance herself, said she never supported the creek idea, blamed it on Linda. The third, well, he just stopped answering calls altogether. But it didn't stop there. The sheriff followed through. Formal citations turned into actual fines, and not small ones either. Trespassing, property damage, endangerment, it stacked up fast. And the best part, they couldn't use HOA funds to pay any of it. Personal liability. Their decision, their problem. I went down to the creek a few days later, just to see it again. The rope swing was still there, moving a little in the breeze like nothing had changed, gravel crunching under my boots, the cut tree stump sitting there like a reminder. I took pictures of everything, every detail, not because I needed more evidence, but because I wanted a record of what they'd done. Something about that moment stuck with me. Standing there, looking at something that was supposed to be mine, something I'd bought, paid for, taken care of, and realizing how easily someone else had decided it wasn't. I fixed what I could over the next few days, cleared the path, planted a new dogwood where the old one had been, added a couple more cameras just in case. But honestly, I wasn't worried anymore. Not the same way, because now people were watching. The neighborhood had seen it, not just what happened to me, but what had been happening to them too. And once that kind of thing gets out, it's hard to put it back. But just when I thought it was settling down, like maybe we'd reached the end of it, something else started. 3 days after the meeting, I noticed a white SUV parked near the edge of my property. Engine running, windows tinted, just sitting there. I watched from the porch for a good 10 minutes while whoever was inside took photos, the creek, the new tree, even my mailbox. Then they drove off without saying a word. I didn't need to guess where that came from. Rachel confirmed it the next day. The HOA had filed a request through their legal firm for a property reassessment, claiming recent structural changes on my land. Basically trying to trigger a zoning review, hoping maybe they could find something, anything, to push back with. It was a weak move, desperate, honestly, and it backfired almost immediately, because the county was already involved. Deputy Harris had filed his report, and when the planning department saw the reassessment request tied to an active trespassing case, it raised flags. Big ones. An inspector showed up the next morning, not to investigate me, but to take a closer look at them. He walked the property line with me, checking markers, pulling out maps, pointing to survey flags I hadn't even noticed before. "You're clean," he said, matter of fact. "Everything here lines up." Then he pointed off toward the HOA side. "But their community garden, that's about 20 feet into county land." I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "And that's just what I can see from here." That's when things really started to snowball. Within a week, it wasn't just the sheriff anymore. It was county code enforcement, environmental inspectors, even the state got involved. Turns out the gravel they'd dumped near my creek had disrupted a protected runoff channel, something about water flow regulations. And since they hadn't filed permits, that opened up a whole new set of violations. I didn't even file that complaint. One of the neighbors did, an older guy named Martin, retired biology teacher. Quiet, kept to himself mostly, but apparently he'd been documenting issues for months. When he saw the footage Rachel shared, he sent it straight to the environmental department. "This was bound to happen," he told me one afternoon, adjusting his hat while we stood near the creek. "They've been pushing limits for years. Someone just finally caught it on camera." A cease and desist order hit the HOA soon after. No more alterations, no more projects. Everything frozen pending investigation. Their lawyer dropped them not long after that. Conflict of interest, apparently, once the full picture came out. And then the residents, they'd had enough. Someone organized an open forum outside the community center. Not official, not HOA controlled. Just people bringing chairs, sharing stories, comparing notes. I didn't plan on saying anything, figured I'd done enough already. But then I saw Linda standing there, arms crossed, still trying to act like she was in charge. And when she interrupted a guy talking about being fined for putting a swing in his backyard, said something about proper enforcement, I couldn't stay quiet. I stepped forward before I even realized I was moving. "You mean the same enforcement you used on land you don't own?" I said, Everything went still. People turned, conversation stopped, and Linda just looked at me, stiff, like she hadn't expected me to show up at all. I held up a folder, copies of everything, reports, fines, legal notices. "You've got over 25,000 in penalties," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And that's before the civil case even finishes." You could feel it, the shift, the moment where doubt turns into certainty. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about my creek anymore. This was about everything they'd been getting away with. And it wasn't over yet. And right there, in that moment, you could feel it, like something finally snapped loose in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift, like people were done pretending this was normal. Linda tried to say something, started with that same tone she always used, controlled, dismissive. "Let's not confuse," but she didn't get far. Someone in the crowd cut her off. Then another voice. Then another. Questions started flying, real ones this time, not the kind she could brush aside with a clipboard and a smile. I didn't stay long after that. Didn't need to. By the time I got back home, I already knew things weren't going back to the way they were. The next couple weeks moved fast, faster than anything up to that point. The state attorney general's office opened an inquiry into the HOA's financials, subpoenas went out, bank records, internal emails, reimbursement logs, and once those got pulled, well, that's when the whole thing cracked open. Turns out Linda and one of the other board members had been approving payments to themselves. Maintenance expenses, community upgrades, things that never actually showed up. Thousands of dollars, routed through a landscaping company that, conveniently, belonged to a relative. And the worst part, it wasn't even hidden that well. It just hadn't been questioned. Until now. Linda was arrested about 2 weeks later. No sirens, no big scene. Just a cruiser pulling up early in the morning, neighbors watching through windows, and her being walked out looking like she still couldn't believe it was happening. The other guy got picked up the same day. After that, everything unraveled quick. The HOA account got frozen. The remaining board members started distancing themselves, claiming they didn't know anything. But the emails told a different story. Signatures, approvals, conversations, it was all there. Enough to pull everyone into it, whether they liked it or not. Rachel finalized the civil suit around the same time. We didn't just go after the tree or the trespassing, we included everything. Legal fees, restoration costs, even emotional distress. And because it involved a governing body stepping outside its authority, the court pushed it through faster than usual. We won. Full payout. Plus a court order requiring the HOA to publicly clarify their jurisdiction boundaries, something they'd avoided for years. But honestly, the money wasn't the part that stuck with me. It was what came after. At the final hearing, Rachel submitted a motion signed by over 40 residents, requesting the removal of the entire HOA board under a clause buried in their own charter. With 2 members under criminal charges and the rest already stepping down, it passed without much resistance. Within a month, the board was gone, replaced by a new group, regular people, nothing like before. A nurse, a retired firefighter, even Martin joined. First thing they did was freeze all fines. Then they started going back through everything, every citation, every complaint, cleaning it up piece by piece. For the first time since I moved there, it felt like a neighborhood. Not a system, just people. One evening, maybe a month after everything settled, I walked back down to the creek. The new dogwood I'd planted had started to take. Small leaves, still fragile, but holding. The gravel was gone. The rope swing had disappeared, and the water, it sounded the way it was supposed to again. Frank came by with his dog, gave me a nod. "Feels different now," he said. "Yeah," I told him, looking out over the water. "Took a lot of noise to get here." And for a while, that was it. Quiet. No notices, no warnings, no unexpected visitors. Just the kind of peace you don't really notice until it's been missing. But then, something showed up in my mailbox. Certified letter, County Tax Assessor's Office. Said my property had been flagged for unreported structural additions related to recreational use, which didn't make any sense because I hadn't built anything. Attached was a blurry photo, aerial shot, showing some kind of wooden platform near a bend in the creek. At first I thought it was mine. Then I looked closer. It wasn't. It was just past my boundary, a section of land that, according to my deed, wasn't owned by me and wasn't owned by the HOA either. County land. Protected green space. I drove straight to the planning office, pulled permit records for the area, and there it was. Application for a wildlife observation deck, approved under a parcel number that made my stomach drop. Mine. I called Rachel from the parking lot. They used my property number, I said. She didn't even pause. That's fraud. And not the kind you argue about in meetings. The kind that gets people arrested. By the end of the week, we had the drone footage, showed a small crew building the platform, working fast, no company markings, like they didn't want to be tied to it. When I went out there myself, I found it, 10 by 12, railing, mounted sign. Community observation point, property of Cedar Ridge, HOA. And right behind it, another sign. Trespassing prohibited. I actually laughed when I saw that, not because it was funny, but because at that point, what else do you do? I called the sheriff. Deputy Harris came out again, this time with someone from the county land department. They didn't need long. One look at the permits, the structure, the location, and it was over. They built on public land, the county rep said, and used your parcel number to get approval. That's identity misappropriation tied to government documents. That word again, misappropriation. Next morning, one of the former board members, Karen, the one who'd kept her head down the longest, got arrested. No drama, same as before, quiet, early, efficient. A couple days later, the last one was picked up out of town. And that's when the final pieces came together. Turns out this platform wasn't a one-off. It was part of a plan, started before everything fell apart. The idea was to build it, label it as HOA property, and slowly expand their claimed boundary, make it look official enough that no one would question it. Except they used the wrong number. My number. And that mistake, that one detail, pulled everything into the light. Charges stacked up fast, fraud, conspiracy, falsifying government documents, serious enough that their assets got frozen while the case moved forward. The county tore the platform down within days, hauled everything out, restored the land, planted new growth like it had never been there. Not long after that, the HOA itself was dissolved. Not restructured, not rebranded, dissolved. Charter revoked, funds redirected into a neutral community trust, no more enforcement, no more fines. Just homeowners managing their own properties again. A few weeks later, there was a neighborhood potluck. Nothing official, just people showing up, bringing food, sitting around like neighbors instead of subjects. Someone handed me a plate, someone else handed me a mic. I didn't plan on saying anything, but I guess I did anyway. I didn't set out to fight anyone. I told them, just standing there, looking at faces that felt different now. I just didn't want to pretend something was okay when it wasn't. There was a pause, not awkward, just real. And I think, maybe the bigger problem wasn't what they were doing. It's how long everyone let it happen. Nobody argued with that. That evening, I walked back down to the creek again. Same path, same bend, but it didn't feel the same. No signs, no chairs, no one claiming anything that wasn't theirs, just water moving the way it always had. I stood there a while, not guarding it, not watching for anything, just standing. And for the first time since all of this started, it actually felt like mine again. But here's the thing I still think about. If I hadn't checked that footage, if I just let it go, if I told myself it wasn't worth the trouble, how far would they have taken it? Would the creek still be mine? Or just another line on a map someone decided to redraw? I don't know. And honestly, that part still bothers me a little. So I'm curious what you think. At what point do you step in? When does keeping the peace turn into letting something slide too far? And if you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or just walked away and let it be? Let me know in the comments, because I've been thinking about that question ever since.